Welcome to our latest installment of Beyond Distribution with GTDC. In our 68th episode, host Frank Vitagliano welcomes IDC's Senior Vice President of Research, Sandra Ng, to discuss the 2026 priorities reshaping enterprise technology and the IT channel. Ng breaks down why composite AI is quickly becoming essential, how agent economics and the human AI matrix are changing productivity and accountability, and what's holding adoption back, especially across APJ. The episode also explores how AI is accelerating cloud modernization and what that means for data residency, latency, and resilience. Don't forget to check all of our episodes and subscribe. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next segment of Beyond Distribution. I am delighted today to have Sandra Ng, Senior Vice President, Research, IDC. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. Good to have seen you and catch up again.
It's good to see you again. We were together not too long ago in Singapore at our event where you spoke to our audience as a keynote speaker. Before we get started, Sandra, one of the things we'd like to do is just have you talk a little bit about yourself and your role at IDC.
Of course. So hello, everybody. I'm a global and APJ research leader at IDC, and we are a technology advisory firm headquartered in the US, and I'm based in Singapore. I lead a global team of domain technology experts spanning devices, consumers, and imaging technology ecosystems. I also oversee IDC's Japan research organization. And I've spent a few decades covering the technology landscape across APJ, tracking, analyzing multiple technology domains. In my current, which is a very new role, brand new in 2026, the remit expands beyond the region, really broadening my coverage and engagements and making this an especially exciting new chapter for myself.
Yeah, that's excellent. You've obviously served a number of different roles over the years and clearly become one of the top professionals in the, certainly in the research field today. How did you start? What was your first job in intelligence? How did you get in there? And what do you enjoy most about, your current role?
So it's funny that, Frank, you're asking me this question at this point in time. I actually began my career as a PC and printer analyst in my previous organization, not with IDC. So in many ways, this new role actually brings me full circle, though in a very different market landscape. As we all know, AI is reshaping all industries, and we are being challenged to look at, familiar domains, things that we are very, very experienced at through new lenses. And one thing that we all have learned that what got us here will not necessarily take us, to the next milestone or the future that we are building towards. So, what I really enjoyed about, my job as a technology analyst, and I've been doing this for so many years, is this constant evolution and the fast pace of the tech industry, right? Being on the inside of this industry gives me a close-up view of emerging developments as they take shape. And equally exciting is also the engagement and the opportunity to partner with brands outside of the tech industry, around the world, supporting them in their transformation journey. So I really have kind of tons of opportunity to work with, the suppliers, the vendors, the distributors, the channels on the supply side, and then the buyers, the practitioners, and the customers on the demand side. And both IDC and I, have, the ability to influence outcomes and really shape the direction of not just technology, but of the industry that technology enables. So this is really exciting for me, and it just keeps me going, year after year.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you just described is exactly why I stay in the industry too. It's exactly why. It's, the constant evolution of the technology is amazingly exciting, and you don't know where it's going to go, right? That's why we rely on people like you to kind of help us with that. And the community piece of it is also really important, because as big as the IT ecosystem is, you end up with a bit of a community, approach, right? I mean, like for example, how we met, in APJ two years ago, I guess, initially, and now we're part of a community. So those two things keep a lot of us in the industry, and probably will for for a little bit longer anyway. So that's great. So clearly IDC invests a lot of time and a lot of resources in studying sort of the macro trends, right? What's happening. So talk a little bit about some recent as well as future development that technology executives and decision makers should pay attention to as we enter into 2026 and beyond.
So, Frank, I don't really know, where to really begin, and because, so many things are happening in the tech industry, and the pace is just accelerating, every other week. And as you said, right, we move from basically a single organization to the ecosystem and into community and just basically kind of a lot of intersection. But I will, kind of perhaps highlight just a few developments, really as, must-watch areas for executives and decision makers. The first that I would say is the move from, concept to necessity for composite AI. So as organizations push for explainability, reliability, and more business outcomes, by the end of this year, 2026, we expect about 70% of the organizations to adopt what we call composite AI approaches. And that's really about blending, generative, predictive, prescriptive, agentic technologies, rather than relying on a single model or a single technique. The second is the rise of agent economics and human AI matrix. And this will really force leaders to kind of rethink about how value and productivity should be measured. So think about AI agents, increasingly performing tasks autonomously. Organizations will really need kind of new frameworks to assess return on investment, workforce impact, accountability, kind of beyond, the traditional and classic cost and efficiency matrix that, we are all very familiar with. And then the last thing that I would say is around cloud modernization for AI. This has been accelerating, and it will accelerate even sharper this year in 2026. By next year, 80% of organizations will be compelled to modernize legacy cloud environments, right? To shift to platforms purpose-built for AI workloads as, computing power becomes more intensified, data, gravity increases, and real-time requirements overwhelm traditional architects. And then closely related to this, which is super important for APJ region, is the expansion of edge computing or edge AI infrastructure. Because when you think about APJ region, we have a lot of geographically large markets where organizations would have to obviously enable their employees in the field. They would have to obviously be able to stay connected with their customers who can be very far away. So when you think about latency, you think about data, residency or data protection, you think about operational resilience. All of this will matter, and therefore we expect to see really this acceleration in terms of the adoption of edge AI infrastructure. So together, this really, frame out kind of the choices that enterprise executives would really have to give priority to in 2026. But I want to just spend a little bit of time to also talk about a major development, which is happening on the consumer side and the relation to B2C, which is business to consumer market segment. So we have begun to see the rapid evolution of AEO, which is answer engine optimization, and GAIO, which is Gen AI optimization. So to put it, very simply, as consumer, right? And I'm sure, Frank, I'm sure you're doing this, and I'm doing this. My friends around me are doing this. My family members are doing this, right? When we look at kind of upgrading, for example, our smartphone, or buying a new product, or before we consume a new service, or before we take a vacation, increasingly we are going to large language model powered assistants like ChatGPT, Gemini, DeepSeek, for product discovery to kind of shortlist basically the brands, the products, so that we are able to make better decisions, right? So you think about these B2C brands, now they are trying to figure out and they're trying to rethink how and where content should be created, they should be structured, where they should be published. And this means that, they need to redesign websites, they have to reprioritize kind of content format, and they have, and they have to think about writing explicitly for AI consumption and not just human search. So this is something that, we're expecting an explosion or at least a sharp increase in adjustment this year. And so it's worth for, technology partners, distributors, and channels to pay attention to this as, new use cases for B2C brands will emerge in 2026.
Yeah, that's really interesting and thought-provoking, because you could really start thinking about the fact and lead to the conclusion that will generate maybe some jobs that don't exist today, and really some requirement for skills that may not be prevalent today in that space. Because if I'm a company that is selling anything, and I know that at some point somebody's going to go, and research it through AI, those results need to be what we would want them to be. And so therefore there has to be some skill associated with how you do all that. That's very interesting.
Wow. This is exactly what B2C brands are, at least the progressive ones, right? This is exactly what they're trying to figure out. They're trying to crack the code here.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Going back for a minute to the enterprise piece, the normal business piece of it. You mentioned 70% and 80%. Has that accelerated faster than you have had anticipated, or is it about on the track that you kind of expected it to be?
Okay, so the 70% and 80% that I talk about, I mean, we haven't reached those numbers, right? So, but we, it's within our expectation that the market will accelerate. So there are a few things that I want to kind of highlight, right? When you think about, whether this is Asia Pacific or kind of, the global marketplace, everything is moving very quickly because of technology, right? So the pace is unprecedented. So therefore, the expectations is things will move a lot faster, right? And operating models and business models will change. But when you look at the region that I'm sitting in, particularly Asia, within the Asia Pacific Japan kind of context, speed and flexibility are pretty much clear differentiators for us, right? We place very strong premium on fast implementation, modular consumption, the ability to scale or to pivot quickly. So expectations are definitely there. Whether it's going to go as high as 70 to 80%, obviously time will tell, but we truly believe that the marketplace is ready, and they will basically accelerate, once they get through the whole experimentation into production, they will accelerate very quickly.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, I know that you guys have a lot more discussions with CIOs and people in the space than I do, but folks I talk to, it's really becoming a lot about ROI and, how quickly can you get ROI and the risks associated with the major investments. But it's clear that it's happening. It's inevitable. It's just a question of how significant and when. So it's great. Sandra, one of the things that you did when you were at our event in November is you presented the IDC FutureScape on Agentic AI and talked about some of your key findings in that area. And I think at that point, the report either had just been released or it hadn't even been released yet, and you were giving us a sneak preview of it. So can you highlight a few of the key findings from that research?
Yeah, sure. I mean, now it feels like November is a lifetime away now.
Yeah.
So a lifetime ago, I should say. So that was basically at the time that we just begin to release our predictions for 2026. And I talk about the tech buyer blueprint for the agentic future. And this blueprint is really a set of kind of 10 interconnected capabilities that buyers need to build as they, prioritize, obviously, from the business angle for 2026, right? But as you said, we don't have the time to go through all 10, so I'm going to just highlight a few, just to basically give you kind of the context and also to look at and the opportunity size from a distributor and channel partner perspective.
Yep.
So the first is around breaking down traditional silos. So when you think about data, you think about workflows, you think about decisions are increasingly cutting across IT, business units, and then now, of course, expanding into partners and then the broader ecosystem, right? So buyers that succeed are basically redesigning operating models so that they, to enable all these cross-functional collaborations, and not only, between humans, but also with AI agents and with external partners, right? So when you think about, organizations were able to do that, and when they're executed properly, they actually deliver higher return on investment, which is, what you mentioned about, when you talk to executives these days, all they care about is, what kind of ROI can I get? How big is it going to be, right? So on the buyer side, when you kind of break down silos, bring together what we call cluster of use cases, that's where basically they will be able to potentially generate higher ROI. And then, of course, from a delivery partner perspective, there's larger contract value. So there's a lot of kind of attached services and stickiness that will happen as a result of that. And IDC, we actually recently created a new ROI formula to reflect these new market dynamics. The second is with regards to organization kind of accelerating from experimentation to production and then to expansion to their ecosystem when they look at the different kind of AI use cases. Now, what we have noticed, and this is going to be an important kind of lesson for every organization out there who are trying to basically speed up their adoption process, is that when we look at the early winners of companies who have gone through that whole experimentation to production and the ability to scale, they are very deliberate in terms of where experimentation turns into production. So they're very selective, very intentional about it, and they are very clear about outcomes, right? Whether being productivity, being resiliency, being customer experience, or revenue growth. So innovation with intent, as we know, creates momentum. So for this particular area, kind of co-creation and on-demand delivery capabilities, particularly through marketplaces, play important roles here. Then the last that I highlighted in November was around this renewed urgency on data platforms, data quality integration, because fragmented data obviously limit autonomy and insights, right? And so the future is not about one model, it's not about one platform, it's certainly not about one vendor. So buyers are becoming orchestrators, and they are managing multiple clouds, models, agents, partners. So orchestration capabilities are definitely must-have in 2026. So these are the three that I've shared out of the 10 in November, that I feel that these are important that cut across basically enterprises of all industries.
Yeah, no, that's great. And of course, folks can get the IDC MarketScape report and get the rest of it, which, because there was a lot of great information there. The data platforms piece is really interesting because as I know, the distributors are making major investments, in their platforms and have been for the last probably 3 or 4 years, and their capabilities are scaling tremendously. Question for you relative to kind of continuing barriers, right? So in other words, we've made great progress, and clearly, as we've talked, the progress will continue. However, there are barriers. There are things that people think about and worry about beyond just ROI. What are some of the barriers that are still out there and that you're seeing and people talk to you about?
Yeah, I would say there are a few, and these three probably are the top three that we see in the marketplace, and it really applied across public organizations, private sector organizations, large, mid-sized organizations. So the first is around governance, right? And this is not only for regulated industries. They obviously have to make sure that they manage risk properly, because if they are non-compliant, they can get into a lot of trouble, right? But even the non-regulated industries, governance is one area that typically slows things down for organizations. Now, granted that on average, enterprises are getting better in the way that they are managing governance, right? Because now we are seeing more, as I mentioned earlier, kind of cross collaboration between functions and with partners and ecosystem. But governance is still an area where it tends to slow things down. And organizations who kind of don't plan and don't have a proper roadmap around governance, especially when you think about kind of traditional classic governance with AI governance, you think about governance, including AI governance integration with your overall business strategy. All of that can slow things down if they are not planned properly and they don't evolve as the organization move forward. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second is around culture. So, we often say that it's not really about technology, and it may not even be about, economics or return on investment. It's really about the culture of the organization. And some organization, because it's so traditional or because it's so fragmented, the way that they manage or the processes are just, so dated, right? That it just slow things down and it make it extremely difficult, extremely hard for them to modernize and to be able to move forward and take advantage of the new capabilities that are coming out from the tech industry. Then the third, which I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone, is around talent, right? And in the tech industry, we see this, right? When cloud emerged, and that's where we saw basically talent shortages kind of in the cloud, professional services space. And then, of course, when we get into the rise of social, right, the social network, the social media, again, we saw basically social engineering and all these different skill sets were lacking at that point in time. And today, AI is certainly one area where there's shortage of talent. But it's not only just about technical skill set, it's about the ability to apply technology in your organizations, in the industry that you play in, right? In the market that you compete in. So talent comes in different shapes and form. It's not just about technology. It's not just about technical talent. So I would say those are the top three barriers that tend to slow things down.
Yeah, that's great. That's very interesting, and I can understand as you think about it, each of them, having spent a lot of time, in large corporations over the last 30 years or so. I can certainly see that, and the talent piece just continues. I mean, that has been an issue, frankly, for as long as I can remember, in terms of just people coming up to speed and having enough skilled resource to do the kinds of things that need to be done, particularly with the dramatic changes we're seeing in terms of the evolution of the technology. So those are great. So wrapping up here, last question might bring you back a little bit to your beginnings, and that's on the hardware side. So when we look at the implications on the hardware side, which categories are either performing well, and which areas maybe you've seen really haven't made the strides that you thought they would. So for example, at one point we were talking about AI PCs being, just exploding, and I'm not sure that's happened yet, and maybe it will over time, but what categories should we be thinking about from a hardware standpoint?
Yeah, so if you look at the overall kind of hardware category, is definitely a market that has been doing well, and it will continue to do well. But to your point, that the higher growth is coming from and will continue to come from kind of what we call the infrastructure side. So when you think about compute, you think about storage, you think about building data centers, right? You think about GPU. So those are the areas that will continue to expand, which is one of the key reasons, right? Or the number one reason why we have memory shortage today, and that's probably going to last for a while in the marketplace. So the infrastructure space is definitely a good place. So if you happen to be kind of a provider or a go-to-market channel in the space, basically it remains to be a space where we will continue to see very strong growth, at least in the foreseeable future. But when you talk about kind of AI PCs, yes, there was obviously there was a lot of expectations around AI PCs. And I think what is going to happen in the entire device category is that AI will be increasingly embedded into these devices, right? Especially these edge devices. So, in the near future or sometime in the midterm, there's going to be kind of no distinction, right? Every device is going to be an AI device or AI-enabled device. That's really what's going to happen when you think about edge devices and just hardware in general. But infrastructure is definitely a segment of the market that's going to continue to do well.
Yeah, that's great, and we certainly see that. So, well, Sandra, this has been terrific. I learned a lot, and I know our listeners will too. So we really appreciate your time and certainly your information that you've provided. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next time I'm in Singapore.
Definitely, let me know the next time you're here. It's my pleasure. Always excited when I'm able to share and to be given a platform to do that. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I love doing what I'm doing, just the fast pace and just kind of the new developments. It's always great to be able to share that.